All right, ladies and gentlemen, first hand of the night is a weird one. There's a $15 open by the low jack, 3 people call, and when I look down at 5-4 suited in the big blind, I say, hey, why not? We're closing the action. Let's put in a call and see what happens. We go 5 ways to this flop. It is not 105 in the middle, it's 75 in the middle, and the board runs out 3-6-5 with 2 hearts. I go ahead and check here. We have a pretty good hand with middle pair and an open ender. I check to let somebody else start building up the pot, and build up the pot they do. The hijack puts in a $25 bet and 3 of us call, so we go to this turn with 175 in the middle and it comes an ace of spades. I go ahead and check once more here. The hijack seems very interested in this hand, puts in a $100 bet. We quickly call and then the remaining 2 players get out of the way. 375 in the middle and the river comes the 10 of diamonds. At this point, I don't think we're going to be any good at showdown, so I contemplate putting in a bet here on this river, but considering the player that we are up against, he's typically on the more aggressive side. He plays an extremely wide range and he definitely does not like to fold. So I don't want to try to bluff an aggressive opponent who doesn't like to fold with just a pair of 5s. Put in the check. Our opponent doesn't take very long before going all in. We look at our hand one more time and I know we have to let it go. It's just unfortunate that we didn't make our hand because our opponent definitely would have fired big on the river regardless. But that's quite all right because it didn't take very long before we got dealt pocket aces. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to make a bigger pot this time. One player limped for $3 and the action got to me. I made it 15. Button folds, the small blind calls, the big blind folds, and then the original limper calls as well. $48 in the middle and we go to this board that comes 10 queen deuce with 2 hearts. I decide to fire here for $15. The small blind goes away. The low jack puts in the call. We go heads up to this turn with 78 in the middle, which brings us a king of clubs. He checks it over to me, and at this point with the board this way, I would typically continue with a bet of $75 to $100 here, but when I look over at our opponent's stack, he doesn't really have that much behind. If I go for a $100 bet here, it's pretty much going to put him all in. This player's been playing very snug all night, so I don't think he's going to call a $100 bet. He also hasn't gotten to showdown with any draws. He typically will only put money in the middle if he has top pair. With all that in mind, I decide to continue here for $30. The opponent quickly calls and we go to this river, which brings us a 6 of clubs. Doesn't really change too much. At this point, I would like to politely ask our opponent for all of it, but when I look over at him, he doesn't really seem to be too interested in this hand. I don't think he would call an all in at this point, so I decided to just squeeze out really thin value here with another $30 bet on the river, and our opponent does put in the call. The last pot was a bit on the smaller side, so let's see if we can bump this up a little bit. There's a $30 open by the under the gun player. The low jack puts in the call. The hijack puts in the call. When the action gets over to me, I look at ace 10 offsuit in the cutoff and I decide to put in the call. The button folds, the small blind folds, and when the action gets back to the big blind, he decides to go all in here for $200. Player from the last hand has amassed a pile of chips and looks like he's debating getting involved, but does end up folding. The hijack decides to put in the call after thinking it over for a little bit. When the action gets back to me, we have a decision here. How could we have a decision in this spot? Ace 10 seems like a pretty easy fold, right? Well, not exactly. I've seen the player on the big blind make moves like this with a hand like Jack 10 suited or Queen Jack suited anytime there was a substantial open and various players limping in the efforts to either isolate or just take down the dead money. And the player putting in the call behind us is typically a more aggressive player, so if he had a strong hand, he definitely would have re-raised the $30 bet. So when he limps and then calls 200, I expect him to either have a small pocket pair or a weak suited ace, anything between ace deuce all the way up to maybe ace 6 or ace 7. So for those reasons, I do decide to put in the call. So we throw in our 200, going 3 ways to this flop with 661 middle, and the board runs out queen deuce 5 with 2 diamonds. Our opponent and I both check. The 6 of clubs changes nothing on the turn. We check it through one more time. 5 of clubs changes absolutely nothing. The action checks through a 3rd time. Our opponent shows king jack of clubs. The big blind does not seem to want to show. I show our ace high and it is somehow good. The $10 button straddle is on by yours truly, and when I look down at pocket queens after 3 players limped in for 10, I decide to bump it up to $60, and to my surprise, all 3 players put in the call. So we are going to this flop with 244 in the middle. Board comes out 3-5 jack rainbow. Action checks to me. I decide to bet $65. The end of the gun player goes all in for 144. We put in the call, and we go to this run out with 526 in the middle, king of diamonds on the turn, 9 of clubs on the river. We show our queens, and our opponent mucks his hand. 325 bones coming our way. For this next one, we look down at king 10 offsuit on the button. There's a $20 open by the low jack. I call and the small blind calls. $63 in the middle, and we go to a board which comes 4-5 king with 2 diamonds. Our opponent continues for $55. I find to be rather large, but we can't fold top pair just yet. 173 in the middle, and the 7 of diamonds peels off on the turn. Now we gotta ask ourselves, did our opponent bet the flop with a flush draw, a king, or some other random hand like ace X, maybe ace queen or ace jack? Personally, if he had a hand like king queen or king jack, I don't think he would have picked that large of a size on the flop. I also think that a flush draw would have bet a bit smaller. So for those reasons, I think our hand is currently ahead. I decide to keep the bet sizing pretty small here to keep our opponent involved in the hand. I go with a bet sizing of $80, and I'm almost immediately check raise to 250. What the heck is going on here? I go deep into the tank for about a minute or two. This line just does not make sense to me. Our opponent is representing a flush, but simultaneously it feels like he's trying to end the hand, bet on the flop, and his check raise on the turn just seem way too large. It doesn't feel like he's going for value. It literally just feels like he's trying to get me to fold my hand and be done with this. So after thinking it over for quite a bit, I decided that I'm gonna trust my gut and just put in the call here. 673 in the middle, and we go to this river, which brings us the King of Hearts. This card helps eliminate the non-existent fear I had of potentially getting sandbagged by a bigger king like king queen or king jack. If another diamond would have come off on the river, I think I would have been a little bit more afraid. Luckily, that wasn't the case, so when our opponent goes all in here, we snap call. He doesn't seem to be too stoked by the fact that we put in the call. Eventually, he does flip his cards over and shows pocket queens with the queen of diamond. That's a pretty good hand, but unfortunately for the villain, ours was better this time around. For this next hand, there's a $15 open, and when various players limp and the action gets back to me on the small blind with ace-2 suited, I'm going to put in a chunky raise here to $60 to try and thin out the field or just scoop the dead money. Fortunately, this doesn't work because we get called by 3 other players, so there's 240 into this pot as we go to this flop that comes 3-10 queen with 2 spades. You go runner for a straight, but outside of that, we have absolutely nothing going on this board here. So for those reasons, we do put in a check. The action checks around, and the ace of spades peels off on the turn. Nobody seemed interested in this pot, so I fire $130 here, praying nobody has a spade. Everybody folds, and we take this one down. For this next hand, we do have the $10 straddle on. We look down at queen 10 offsuit on the button. There's an open to 20 by under the gun. The middle position player puts in the call. Action gets back over to me, and we put in the call, and the small blind folds. $64 in the middle. We go to this board run out, which comes 10 jack 9 with 2 hearts. We have middle pair and an open-ended straight draw. Under the gun continues for $45 here. The middle position player puts in the call, and when the action gets back to me, I am not just calling here. I noticed that the under the gun player doesn't have that much money left behind, about 200 and some change, but the middle position player is quite a bit deeper. With the hand this strong, I'm okay isolating the under the gun player, so I put in a raise to 160. The action gets over to him, and he very quickly goes all in. The middle position player gets out of the way like we wanted, and obviously I am going to call the additional $54. 517 in the middle. The queen of clubs peels off on the turn. The ace of spades hits the river. We show our 2 pair, and our opponent mucks his hand. 293 in profit coming our way. For this next hand, we look down at king queen suited in the cutoff. The low jack decides to bet $15. Hijack comes along for the ride. I don't want to let the players behind me in, so I decide to re-raise here to $45. The low jack and hijack put in the call, but everybody else got out of the way. 141 in the middle, and we go to this run out, which comes queen 9-5 rainbow. We off top pair with a decent kicker. Not much else going on this board here, so I'm going to down bet here to $30. Low jack puts in the call and the hijack folds. We go heads up to this turn, which comes the ace of diamonds, and to my surprise, the low jack decides to bet 75 here. We were downgraded to second pair, but we did pick up the nut flush draw, so there's no world where we're ever going to fold here. But looking back at the footage now, I think this would have been a good spot for a check raise, but we just called instead. So we go to this river with 351 in the middle. The 3 of diamonds peels off and we make our flush. To make things even better, our opponent bets $100. I can't imagine he'll call a big bet, so I re-raise to 225. Unfortunately, our opponent mucks pretty quickly here. Not sure what he bet for 100 and folded to 125 more. Obviously we had it this time, so I guess it's a good fold. Either way, we scoop 301 big ones. For this next hand, we look down at queen jack suited. The under the gun player limps, the middle position player makes 20. I decide to bump it up to 40 in the low jack, trying to thin out the field a little bit, but I'm an absolute maniac thinking that anybody's gonna fold. Nobody's been folding to me today. The button calls the 40, small blind, big blind, and under the gun all call the 40. We go multi-way to this flop with 240 in the middle. The board comes out deuce 4-5 with 2 hearts. The action checks over to the middle position player, who continues here for $60. I feel like a raise would be okay here. I'm also okay with just calling with this many people involved. I assume a couple people are gonna come along for $60. Button ends up jamming for less, goes all in for 44. Small and big blind get out of the way. Under the gun raises to 145, and then the middle position player re-shoves. He has well over 1,000 here and covers us. I don't want to chase this draw for almost $800 here, so I go ahead and just muck my hand. Under the gun ends up putting in the call. The middle position player immediately flips over ace-3 of diamonds for the second nuts. 1266 in the middle, and we go to this run out, which comes a 10 of clubs and a 10 of diamonds. And that's when under the gun proudly flips over pocket fives for a flop top set and a runner full house. Yikes, that feels real bad. Feel like the middle position player played his straight pretty well there. He just got very unlucky that under the gun just went running cards for exactly what he needed to scoop the pot. For this next hand, we look down at queen 10 offsuit on the big blind. Under the gun opens to $30. Middle position puts in the call. The low jack folds, hijack folds, cutoff folds, button folds, small blind folds. And when it gets back to me, since I'm closing the action, I decided to get a little sticky here and come along for the ride. $90 in the middle, and we go to this flop 3 ways, which comes 5-4 jack rainbow. I have absolutely nothing on this and no plans to try and steal it yet. I go ahead and check, and the action checks through. When the queen of hearts peels on the turn, we now have top, but our kicker's not too good, so I go ahead and check it once again. Middle position player decides to fire for 50. We're going to call the 50 with top pair. 190 in the middle, and the river now comes a queen of clubs. Although we've improved to trips, I expect the middle position player has a queen in this spot. This player's been playing really snug, so I imagine his kicker is bigger than ours. If he doesn't have a queen, I don't imagine he's going to call any bets here on the river. And if he does have a queen, I know for a fact that we are out kicked, so I don't really see much point in betting. So I go ahead and check it over to him. He bets 125. I'm going to call just in case he is betting this with some sort of missed flush or straight draw. He shows this queen king, and he's going to have a good sized pot going his way. For his next hand, we look down at ace queen offsuit and the hijack. The action folds over to me, and I decide to bet $15 here. The cutoff comes along for the ride, and the button raises to 30. Small blind calls at 30, and then it gets back over to us. At this point, I've noticed that the small blind is pretty short here. I think if we put in a chunky re-raise here, we can get rid of the cutoff and the button. And the small blind is either going to go all in or fold, considering he already put in about 1/5 of his stack into the middle. I can't imagine he's going to fold this point. So I come out and re-raise for $140. The cutoff and the button fold as planned, and the small blind does in fact go all in for 100. So I misspoke earlier. He had 1/3 of his money out, not 1/5. Anyhow, we go to this run out heads up with 245 in the middle, and the board comes 9-4 jack rainbow. A 4 of hearts on the turn does not improve our hand whatsoever, but we end up hitting an ace on the river. Small blind mucks his hand and we scoop a $145 profit. For this next hand, we look down a king queen offsuit on the cutoff. Action folds over to the low jack, who decides to bet $20. I go ahead and just put in the call here for $20. Under the gun comes along as well, so there's $60 in this middle as we go out to this board, which comes queen 10 deuce rainbow. Action checks over to me, so I go ahead and put in a bet of $15. We get re-raised by under the gun to 30. This individual rarely puts in a check raise, so I'm expecting this to either be queen 10 or pocket deuces 100% of the time. But for $15 more and with the opportunity to improve, I can't let go of our hand just yet. 150 in the middle and the king of hearts comes on the turn. Under the gun bets 50. Player in the middle calls 50. I make it 175 trying to entice one on the gun. I make it 175 trying to entice under the gun to just go all in here. Get the player in the middle out of the way because this board is very wet. That's exactly what happens. 700 in the middle and the jack of clubs hits the river. We show our 2 pair and our opponent shakes their head and says she also had 2 pair with queen 10. We're taking down this pot, scoring a $400 profit. For this next hand, we look down at pocket aces once again. I'm under the gun and decide to raise to $20. We instantly get re-raised to $80 by the middle position player. It folds over to us, and while I can make an argument for raising here, our opponent is taking a pretty strong line here, so I just flat his $80. 180 in the middle, and the board comes out jack a7 with 2 clubs. Check the action to the opponent, bet 65. I tank for a little bit, making it look like I have a hard decision, and then put in the call. 310 in the middle, and the queen of hearts comes on the turn. I check with the intentions of going all in after our opponent bets, but he saves me the effort by going all in himself for 415. We flip over top set, and then the river comes a 10 of clubs, giving our opponent not only a straight but also a flush. Yikes. Even if we didn't slow play our aces, I don't think our opponent was going to fold after the flop. Last hand, we didn't do anything too special. I had a $20 straddle in, and then I bluffed my socks off with ace queen offsuit, so I'm going to give you guys a session update as this hand is playing in the background. We bought in for 300 originally, added on another 300 for the session. Then about mid-session, we topped off an additional $700. We ran that up to 1325, so a total profit of $1,825 on the session. Not a bad outcome whatsoever. We've been on a heater the last couple of sessions, and your boy is gonna ride it till it dies. Anyhow, that's all I have for you guys this week. Sorry we don't have any b-roll of the cashing in, cashing out, or the stack updates. Not sure what happened this session, but I just didn't record those things this time around. Anyhow, if you made it this far into the video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you're on the Central Coast, as per usual, we play at Outlaws every Thursday at 5 p.m. It's a wonderful time. Come on down and join us for the action. All right, guys, that's all I have for you for this week. Thank you for stopping by once again, and good luck on the felt.